Double team, pass to Draymond, over to the corner. Andre for three. Good! And he was fouled! The foul is on Griffin, and he is gone.
Tim Roy loving it as the Warriors hold on. The knockout is the hardest thing in the NBA. It's the beauty of the NBA playoffs. Talk about coaching. What is a successful, good resume? It's a work in progress right now, and we'll look at that, plus introduce you to Darvin Ham and the Warriors' late-game offense is our film study. It's all next on Tip-Off. Hi there, I'm David Locke. Welcome to a Friday edition of the Tip-Off. Glad to have you aboard wherever you might be getting this, whenever you might be listening on the podcast world that lets you do it. Maybe you're doing weekend chores on a gorgeous weekend in Salt Lake City. Maybe you're in the Philippines. Maybe you're in Europe somewhere, wherever it might be. Glad to have you aboard. Maybe you're in Los Angeles where the Dodgers won their 10,000th game, and I don't care. All right, hope you're good. Thanks for tuning in. Last night in the NBA was just terrific. Just terrific. The beauty of the March Madness is the one and done. The beauty of the NBA, which takes a little longer to digest and get to, is the knockout. There's three different types of wins in the NBA. There's a regular season win, there's a playoff win, and then there's the win that knocks a team out. And you saw it last night in different ways. Indiana closing on, I think it was about a 14-2 run, as late in that game, Atlanta just couldn't make the play, and Indiana just took it to a different level. David West was fabulous in the fourth quarter last night for Indiana, they're trailing in that fourth with about 4 or 5 minutes left, and thinking to myself, oh my goodness, here it comes. This could be, I was with my daughter driving home from my son's Little League game, and she's in the car, and she's a big sports fan. So I said to her, this could be the greatest upset in the history of the NBA, and here we are with 5 minutes, 3:16 left. He gets the jumper, and it's a 5-point game, and then they just, David West just took over in a very impressive, scoring, I think, 6 of the next 8 points. More importantly, defensively, they put it down on him, and Millsap had to go one-on-one, missed. Antic missed a 26-footer. They turned it over once. Atlanta just didn't have the guy or the answer to what to do. But what it more is over was you simply just knocking somebody out in the NBA, particularly a team that's probably better than you, is a completely different process than anything you've seen before. It was obvious if you watched Oklahoma City, Memphis in the first, right away, right? It was an 8-point game at the end of one. 25-17, Mr. Unreliable, Kevin Durant. That's an incredible story. The Oklahoman, who's owned, by the way, by the wife's family of Clay Bennett owns and is the front man for the Thunder, who ripped their team away from Seattle. Clay Bennett is the guy who led that whole deal. His wife is a Gaylord. The Gaylords own the Oklahoman. The headline in the Oklahoman, Mr. Unreliable on Kevin Durant. Well, Mr. Unreliable came out with 14 points in the first quarter last night and took 10 shot attempts to Russell Westbrook's 4 and ended any doubt of what this basketball game was going to be last night. That was an MVP type performance, and that is the issue with that team. We can all talk that there's two issues with Oklahoma City. One, they don't have any options after their 3 main guys to be successful. Their second problem, frankly, is who's the guy. And Russell gets the ball in his hands and gets ahead of steam and doesn't have a lot of interest in giving that up. And that's a big issue. But they were up 10 early in the third. It got down to 6 for a while there in the second quarter, and you kind of thought it still had a ball game. And then bang, closing the second half was awesome on a 10-2 run to go up by 17 and pretty much ended that game. And then the final game of the night was the same concept. The Warriors leave a lot to be desired in a lot of the things they do, and we'll look at the way their offensive play calling late in the game last night was miserable, except for the fact that it works. And so it's not miserable, right? I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit, but Mark Jackson, on one level, is on the verge of getting fired, and probably more because of his personality than anything else. And on the other level, his teams just play hard. His players put it out there without Andrew Bogut, without Jermaine O'Neal, with David Lee fouled out, and the Warriors got through last night. Pretty awesome. So Saturday's going to be epic. 3 Game 7s along the way. That's good stuff. Cancel whatever plans you had on Saturday. Tonight, we have Toronto, Brooklyn, Game 6 to force Game 7. Dallas trying to force Game 7, and Portland trying to win it. If Portland loses tonight, they could be in a little bit of trouble. All right, coaching. So everything I hear about when I listen to Randy Rigby and I listen to Dennis Lindsay with 1280 The Zone and Spence, what becomes clear is that the Jazz are doing a tremendous amount of research into this coaching search, taking a very analytical approach and really analyzing what is the road to be a successful head coach. Is there, it doesn't mean you only interview those guys, but is there anything to it? So I have decided that I'm going to do the same. I'll share it with you. I'm doing it on Google so I can share it with you. And it's interesting to just kind of see some of the things I'm looking at early on. And I'm just, guys can be in multiple categories, but player to assistant coach to head coach, is that successful? Player to coach, just directly to coach, is that successful? The stereotype on that is that it isn't. Magic Johnson fails, but the fact is that Danny Ainge has been successful, Larry Bird's been successful, Mark Jackson's been successful, Jason Kidd's now been successful. So the player direct to head coach, Danny Ainge was an assistant for like a week, is actually not bad. Assistant, no head coaching experience to head coach. Second or third stint as a head coach, successful. Minor league head coach to assistant to head coach. College to pros. College to assistant to head. Player college assistant to head. That's Rick Adelman. Previous head coaching experience, good at previous spot. And national team coaching is the way I've broken this in. And I'm also looking at family trees. What's interesting, and I'm not done yet, and again, I'll have to share it with you when I do finish it. Some interesting trends here. Some sort of head coaching experience somewhere seems to be very important. Steve Clifford was at Adelphi University, a small college. Chuck Daly was at Princeton. Scott Brooks was a minor league head coach. Phil Jackson was a minor league head coach. George Karl was a minor league head coach. Terry Stotts was a minor league head coach. Dave Yeager's doing well as a minor league head coach. Flip Saunders, the Muslims. There does seem to be, if you look back at the CBA, was a nice training ground for coaches. Steve Clifford was, as I just mentioned. So you start to look at some of these, and you begin to see some sort of pattern that exists, at least. Actually, right now, and I'm not done, I have found kind of one of two patterns. And the one of two patterns are either that of, frankly, former iconic player, somewhat iconic player to head coach. The other one that seems to maybe have a little bit of a pattern is player to assistant coach to head coach. And finally, that one's a little interesting because what doesn't seem to have a lot of success, Ty fits into player to assistant coach to head coach. What doesn't seem to have a lot of success is assistant coach to head coach. Just coming through without a lot. And when you start, but what's interesting is when you start looking at player to assistant coach to head coach, what then has to kick in is some sort of head coaching experience. So Rick Adelman had head coaching experience. Scott Brooks had head coaching experience. Rick Carlisle did not. And yet, has been a very successful head coach. George Karl, player, had head coaching experience. Pat Riley's interesting because I think Pat Riley came straight out of the broadcast booth. So Mike D'Antoni, player to assistant to head coach, turned out quite well. So there's no one pattern, but the one thing I'm kind of finding is, or a few things I'm finding are previous head coaching experience somewhere along the way seems to be pretty important. Carlisle didn't have that. It's been great. He was an assistant for 11 seasons, though. He was an assistant in New Jersey for 5, then in Portland for 4, and in Indiana for 3 or 4. I mean, he's a funky bird because he's not a great communicator. That's probably why he had such short stints in Detroit and Indiana and is now holding it through. In Dallas, he's not the model, but he's one of the best coaches in the league today, so it's probably worth keeping a little bit of an eye on. So I'll keep working on this. It does make me suddenly think to myself that coaches with D-League experience are probably very important on our board. In other words, if you can't go get George Karl, a Lionel Hollins, or a Stan Van Gundy because the other jobs are open or you don't think that they match the organization. I mean, I love George Karl, but I'm not sure George Karl's track record coincides with where we are as an organization. I mean, I love George. It'd be great fun, and he's a good coach, and we'd probably win pretty quickly. But I think, have to ask yourself a little bit on George, whether or not, is there anything to the fact that now he was at Seattle for 7 years. His contract was up, and they decided to let him go. He was at Milwaukee for 5 years, very successful. His contract was up, they decided to let him go. He was at Denver for a long time, for 9 years. So it's not as though he's a short shifter, but there is something where these teams, despite his awesome success, aren't renewing him. And he's also 62 at this point, but he does win. There's no question. And that's another one. I think previous success as a head coach seems to be an indicator of head coaching success. So with all this said, I guess right now I would narrow it in, if I had to, into 3 different types of categories. Some extent, the iconic player who knows the game, steps into the head coaching job and seems to be actually pretty successful. Previous head coaching success in the NBA is a pretty nice indicator. And then head coaching experience at a previous level. Minor league seems to work. Karl, Stotts, Phil Jackson, Dave Yeager, Flip Saunders, Eric Musselman. I ran through them. And then, and sometimes that's small college coaching. That's where Adelman and Clifford come into some of that level on the small college coaching. So who does that leave? Just let me throw out these names for you. These are the current NBA assistant coaches that I could find that are currently NBA assistant coaches that have been a D-League or minor league head coach, and maybe even have some college head coaching experience. So Quinn Snyder, who we talked about, has been a head coach in Missouri and a head coach in the D-League. Brian Gates is a assistant in New Orleans with Monte Williams. He was a head coach for the Idaho Stampede. Our own Brad Jones was a head coach in a small college with some good success there, then won the D-League and is now on our bench. Alex Jensen has good college, no head coaching experience on the collegiate, but does have D-League. Jay Larinaga, who we talked about the other day, the Boston Celtics assistant, 2 years as a Erie Bay of the D-League head coach. Now with the Boston Celtics in his second year. His father, if you missed it the other day, we looked at, is the head coach of the University of Miami. Pat Delaney is a name that's a D-League assistant coach or head coach that's now an NBA head coach. I don't know a huge amount about him, frankly, and his background of things. He is with the Miami Heat. He's very young. In some ways, he seems to be kind of their next up-and-comer. He may only be classified as an advanced scout. I think they may have moved him onto the bench in this last year. He's in their 10th year with the Heat, so he's kind of their next Spoelstra. But he went and spent some time as a D-League head coach in the process along the way. Darvin Ham, who I'll highlight for you in a moment, is our coach of the day from Atlanta. Nate Tibbetts in Portland is an interesting name with that Portland staff having some success there. He was a D-League head coach. These are all younger guys. They're part of development. They probably kind of match where we are as a franchise. I mean, that's probably a discussion for next week is really what are we looking for as a head coach, and who is that head coach? Tibbetts was in Cleveland with the Cavaliers for a few years, I think with Byron Scott, and was the head coach of the Tulsa 66ers, which is the Thunder D-League team, and had a pretty good success there, won 61% of his games, 2 trips there. Dale Osborne was the head coach of Tulsa after Tibbetts left. He was also the assistant for Brad Jones in the D-League. He's now in Portland, is a pretty good another name that just into this mix of kind of no name, but with that kind of fitting this mold. Nick Nurse is a coach currently in Toronto with the Raptors. He spent 12 years coaching in Europe, mostly in the British Basketball League. He also spent some time in the D-League. He's 46 years old. He's interesting to me, and we'll talk. I'll mention him. He's been coaching since '89. I mean, this guy's just a coach. And has kind of been all over various things in the process. He actually went to the college game for a while. He was the D-League Coach of the Year, by the way, in 2010-11 when he was with the Iowa, and then he moved over to Rio Grande, which is interesting because it's got some of the Moneyball background with Daryl Morey, I think, there. So, and his Rio Grande Vipers team won the D-League Finals when he was the head coach, and now has become an assistant in Toronto. So Nick Nurse probably is a name we should probably get to know. Dwayne, another one that's still in the playoffs, at least for another day, is, I know these are all like, where are you finding these? Well, these are the guys. These are D-League head coaches that are now in the NBA. Dwayne Tickner is in Memphis. He was the head coach of the Dakota Wizards for 2 seasons. And has also been a head coach of the Sky Force, so he's got some head coaching experience with them. He and Elston Turner are both on the bench. Elston Turner's interesting because his name's going to float around a lot, but with no head coaching experience. He's kind of that other model, player to assistant to coach, which is a little questionable. Player to assistant to coach with head coaching experience somewhere along the way seems to be not a bad mix, though. And finally, Taylor Jenkins is another one of these Atlanta guys on the Atlanta bench who spend some time in the NBA, or in the D-League. So these are just names. They're guys. I don't know. They're probably not moving your meter a great deal, but I also would tell you I think this is probably where we might want to kind of put our attention. Jenkins was the head coach of the Austin Toros, which is part of the Spurs organization. Jenkins then was hired by Danny Ferry with San Antonio ties to go to Atlanta and be the assistant coach there, and he came up through the Spurs basketball operations rank 2007 through 2008, so that is right in the wheelhouse of Dennis Lindsay, and was an assistant on the Summer League team when Lindsay was there. So Taylor Jenkins might be a name, that's worth grabbing. So again, and Taylor Jenkins is an interesting guy. He's I don't know if you care about this kind of stuff, but he's pretty bright. I think he's an Ivy Leaguer. Went to the University of Penn, if I correctly. That's a name I'll highlight him coming up a little bit more. So again, those names are Quinn Snyder, we've highlighted, Jay Larinaga, who we've highlighted, Darvin Ham, we'll look at today, Taylor Jenkins, Brian Gates, Brad Jones, Alex Jensen, Pat Delaney, Nate Tibbetts, Dale Osborne, Nick Nurse, and Dwayne Tickner, and I'll tell you more about those as time comes up in the upcoming days. The questions are open for you, by the way, if you want to submit a question. Yesterday on the show, I talked about the order of preference of jobs, and some people questioned why I had what I had, and let me explain it a little bit more, and I think, for each coach it may be different, right? If Indiana opens, I think that's the high job. Some people don't think Indiana's going to open. Maybe it's simply just because Frank Vogel will get hired in 12 seconds. Indiana makes that move. Frank Vogel is the top of our list. Number one, immediately on the top of our list. So I don't know that for a fact. I mean, I just kind of logically deducing the guy's got a great track record, and I think he moves to the top of every single person's list. News just broke out of Orlando, by the way. Jacques Vaughn has had his contract extended. Nice to see for the former Jazzman. Jacques Vaughn having his contract extended. Okay, I had Indiana, Oklahoma City, Golden State. If any of those three open, that they're number one on the list. Then I had New Orleans, who is not open right now, but I somehow just keep thinking Monte Williams is not going to survive this. I may be wrong, but maybe would have known by now. But that's because of Anthony Davis. The Lakers, simply because of LA cap room and the panache. Minnesota's interesting. I put them above because they have Kevin Love. And you look at that roster and you think to yourself, we could win this year. Now, the flip side of that is that they have Kevin Love, and it's going to be a problem right away. And with Kevin Love and the contract. And so for people who disagreed with me on that, you know what? I could buy it. I think Minnesota's in a disastrous situation, but I'm also Stan Van Gundy, and I look at that and I think I could win right away with this. New York, because they're New York. Excuse me. I agree they've got all sorts of issues. They got funky ownership, but they still have a good deal. You know, they have a good situation to be in. Utah I put next, then Detroit, and then Milwaukee. I don't think I've forgotten any openings right now, but that's my thought on it. On where this thing and how this thing plays. All right, let me introduce you to Darvin Ham. Darvin has got a little bit of a Spurs family tree to him. With some of his tie-ins, he has a Texas tie to him, which may put him on our general manager's background a little bit. He is currently an assistant coach with the Atlanta Hawks, so he was hired by Danny Ferry, spent the last 2 seasons prior to that with the Lakers. Previously to the Lakers, he was the head coach of the New Mexico Thunderbirds to the NBA D-League, so he now fits into the player because he had an 8-year NBA playing career, about 415 games of his career. He won the slam dunk contest. He smashed a backboard when he was at college at Texas Tech. It might be what he's best known for in the NCAA tournament. He was not an elite level player, but he was kind of a banger, big, moderate-sized big man, really kind of an unders. He was in the Corliss Williamson, Byron Houston mix of guys. He was born in 1973, so he's 41 years old. He's got 3 kids. One of them's out of college. He's worked his way up the coaching ranks from being 3 years in the D-League as an assistant, 2 years with the Lakers, now with Atlanta, and 12 years of pro ball experience, 8 of those in the NBA. And has the Spurs kind of semi-stamp of approval just with the hire of Atlanta and Danny Ferry. So keep an eye on him. He fits a lot of the boxes that we're touching about. He's got D-League coaching experience. He's an NBA player. He's been with a Spurs-type organization. He fits a lot of those little boxes. So keep an eye on Darvin Ham, who is currently an assistant in Atlanta. All right, let's do a little film study. I'm going to do something a little differently today. We're just going to run through the final plays of the Golden State Warriors last night. Really somewhat out of as much as we all, I think Mark Jackson's probably flummoxing a lot of people. They win last night. They hold on. They're undermanned. It's rather impressive. And at the same time, frankly, what they run is just so lacking in creativity most of the time. It's worth taking a look at. Let's start. It's a we can start here. 3:30 left in the ball game. Give me a minute. Oh, there's an error has occurred. Maybe we're not doing this today. Something just didn't work. Let's see. Sorry, an error has occurred while processing the video playlist request. Please try. All right, well, maybe that's just let's try this one. Nope. The video requests are not working on NBA.com today, which means film study is off unless it works. Nope. I think there's something wrong. Let me try one other quick idea I have. Stick with me. Or don't. Or just leave. It does you no good to hit pause because you won't know when I've come back with my idea. Let's see if this works. Maybe the video on this game is just not working. Warriors shot 39%. Clippers shot 37%. Clippers shot 31% from 3. Warriors shot 29% from 3. You know why? Because it's a 6th game of a playoff series, and people know each other. And this might be, to Mark Jackson's defense, if this works, this might be why nope, it's not working. Why you're getting what you're getting. There was just nothing. They just ran one-on-ones and post-ups. But maybe at this point, it doesn't. 6 games in the series, you run plays. Everybody knows what they are anyway, so it doesn't really matter a great deal. All right, I apologize. No film study days. NBA.com site was not quite clicking. That is tip-off. I'll be on. For those of you that are live, I'll be on at 9 o'clock with DJ and PK. Have a good one.